Why do you think that Maddox has written this book?
Yeah, it's interesting why Marion Maddox has written this book, Taking God to School. She writes it as an academic, but identifies herself as a church-going person, and yet she's written this book, which is really saying God shouldn't be in school. It's suggesting that there has been a kind of subtle and surreptitious reintroducing God into school, and through many means, not just the Christian school movement, but through many means. And basically, I think her premise is that religion and education should be kept separate. Now, she's also written it because I think she wants to raise the discussion as to whether it's a good thing to have such a infiltration of religion, and particularly Christianity, into our schooling system.
Yeah, okay, so do you think she's got a point?
Yeah, look, I think she has got a point. I think there is a discussion to be had that we live in a sort of a strange time where we've got a growing independent school system, and probably the fastest growing sector is the sort of Christian school sector, which even though we've always had schools in Australia that have had Christian basis, this kind of movement, which is gaining momentum, of Christian schools of various types popping up all over the country, that are saying, we actually want to do education differently. We want to do it from a biblical perspective. That's an interesting phenomenon, and it needs some discussion. And I also, the fact that we still have access into schools by local churches to teach scripture or special religious education. We've got a chaplaincy system, and so we've got this strange situation where we've got a public school system, and we've also got an independent school system. And we've got also a public school system that has quite open opportunities for Christian people to come in and to present the gospel. And so I think Maddox asks, are we happy with this? Do we want this? Is this a good thing? Have we had a public discussion about it? And I think they're good things to have a public discussion about.
Well, so you're happy for the discussion to happen, but do you agree with anything else that she's unfolded in that process?
Yeah, look, and she says a lot of things, and I think one of the things that that resonate with me about what Maddox is saying is that she's identified, along with a whole lot of other people, that education and schooling now has become a commodity that gets promoted and sold, and so there's a very strong economic promotion, advertising kind of thing surrounding education. And not only is education now a commodity where we're competing for the education dollar, if you like, from clients, it's also become a defining feature about what social status you have, and the schools that your kids attend will give you particular social status. And from that point of view, I warm to what she's saying. I've always struggled against that kind of classist or elitist kind of thing that education gets used to promote. So I think she does have a point where she talks about, schools with pools, and brings up the anomalies that are associated with the funding according to the SES and so forth. And I think she has a point to say, are there inequalities? Have we got it right? But I think she doesn't recognise that what the Gonski report has tried to do is to say we need to fund equitably education and enshrine the principle that all parents, regardless of what kind of school they want for their children, should be supported by the government in some way for the education of their children.
Okay, well, Kat, so there's some agreement from you. What do you take exception to in the book? Anything? Yeah,
well, there's lots of things, but I think the main criticism I would have is going back to her initial premise, and I'd take this for two reasons. One is, I guess, historically, and the other is philosophically. Let me start with historically. Maddox is saying that we have reverted from our great project of free, compulsory, secular education. And she's talking about the public school paradigm, which was set up in Australia in various colonies to be compulsory and to be free and to be secular. But the understanding of secular in the context, the historical context, was very much that there was to be a non-sectarian approach to education because of the various denominations. Generally, it was still accepted that there was a Christian worldview pervading education. Indeed, in the public school they had Bible reading and they had general Christian instruction, but it was not to favour any particular denomination. Now, of course, there were people without affiliation to a Christian denomination, and there were out and out secularists and so forth, but generally the kind of prevailing worldview of the day was that a general Christian framework. Now that's the historical context, and to say that we had that kind of secularism, meaning free of any religious perspective, is just plainly wrong. It's always been there. But the other criticism I have is philosophical, that I don't believe you can ever separate education from religion. In fact, Neil Postman in his book, The End of Education, makes the point that education is always driven by your view of God. And his definition of God is big meta-narratives that motivate us and give life meaning. But his point still is valid, that if we're talking about the world in which we live and the nature of the world in which we live and meaning that's attached to that world, they are inevitably religious questions. And so we are always going to have some kind of religious orientation, some kind of worldview platform from which we do education. And it's just misleading to say, take religion, in this case Christianity, out. It shouldn't be involved, and leave another very dominant worldview there, which is the prevailing worldview of today, which is secularism. Now that's it. Secular is just the stuff of everyday life, and we're all involved in the secular. But secularism is the philosophy which says the stuff of everyday life is all there is. And that is a philosophical, if you like, religious worldview foundation. And so it's what God you have in the school, not whether God should be there or not. It's what God you have, and who decides what God should be in the school that parents want their kids to go to. That's what it's about, I think.
Well put, Ken. Thank you for your time today. Any final sort of observations or comments about the book?
No, look, and as I said, I think it's great that it's out there in the public space and people are responding and talking about this great question of the place of God in life. I mean, and from my perspective, God owns the whole show. It's His world, and it's in a sense a bit strange saying, what part of life should God be involved in? So, good question to ask.
Yeah, thanks.